Welcome back this last segment of the Fourth Estate, and we're discussing the recent Uwezo report. We started with social sector, security sector reform processes that are going on within the Ministry of Finance with NSSF and our social security. On this question of the Uwezo report, I asked the question, I want to put it back to you. Where does the buck stop? You're pushing these children into a very competitive global economy. People are crying Chinese are invading Uganda's space. Indians, Pakistanis, Afghanistans. Within the East African community, you have Kenya, which has already a stronger economy, more professionals, still giving a better education. Tanzania is stronger in all aspects than we are. And you're shoving these children, half prepared, and throwing them into the wilderness. Whose responsibility? How do you redeem the situation?
Well, I think it has to obviously be both on the side of parents and also on the side of government. I think on the side of parents, we've already covered. On the side of government, I think there needs to be a rethinking about the goal of education. Right now, as Morrison said, which has been driven both by the international policy environment, which is education for all, trying to get kids in school. So that was the goal, to get kids in school. Now there needs to be a rethinking, which is more than just having warm bodies in a classroom, but to say, are these children learning anything? The outcome that is important has to be something like literacy. It has to be numeracy, and we have to have those be the targets, and that teachers are also held accountable for making sure children achieve those things. Right now, they might be held accountable, for example, for passing a class to the next level, but maybe the majority of that class hasn't learned anything that they're supposed to have learned.
Because government passed a policy and said, don't make children repeat.
Yeah, exactly. So you're pushing kids through the system, and then they get further and further behind because the next curriculum relies on the previous year's curriculum, and if they haven't learned it, then they're unable to succeed the next year, which makes them more likely to drop out, as we see happens quite frequently.
You have another crisis, which we talked about on a radio talk show on Friday, which is mediocrity is breeding is more mediocrity. If children who went to school in 1997 got a crappy education, they graduate and become teachers, they get out and they're teaching an even crappier, they're even crappier in their teaching to those they're teaching today. So you're reproducing levels where the standard is lowering consistently and without any sight of where it's going to stop.
Well, I think first of all, it's very important to, as you mentioned in the World Bank study, that they gave a test to primary school teachers in P4, and I think 1 out of 5 was able to get 80% or more on the test. Now, 80% is not very good to begin with, but even then, only 1 in 5 teachers were able to do that. So you have a situation in which, as you're saying, there's teachers who are unable to help children to achieve these learning outcomes. And I have to say also that Uganda actually has a very strong history of education dating back to the 1910s, 1920s. There was massive investment in education in this country, across the country actually, provided primarily by missionaries, both Catholic and Protestant missionaries, and then there was schools that were set up by the Muslim community as well. But you had massive investment in education, and you had churches particularly interested in making sure people could read, because it was important. They saw it spiritually, it was important for people to be able to read the Bible. Now, maybe you could popularize a literacy campaign by appealing to people's very deeply held religious beliefs, which is to say, if you want to be able to read the Bible, if you want to be able to, really engage with your religion, it's important that
I think the church has lost that now. It's all crazy about the Anti-Homosexuality Act.
Maybe, unfortunately.
Between Chris and Morrison, I don't know who speaks first and who speaks last, because you've been debating that quietly in the corner here.
Speaks first.
Chris, do you agree to that? Okay, Chris. The question of duty bearers, the question of, do you need to take this education back to the founding institutions, especially the churches? Do you think that would help the situation?
When we started this show, I remember telling you clearly that the biggest trouble we have faced under the Museveni domination is that of spreading ideological anarchy. And because of that anarchy has spread to every sector in this country. And if you understood me well, you'll begin understanding now that what I said in the beginning is exactly what we are discussing at the end of the show. Melinda talks about the goals of education. What are they? Are they defined? What ideology drives our going to school? Whom do we want to be? What are the gaps? How do we fill them? Which professionals do we need? Where? How do we place them? It's just not even educating. After educating, how do you place them? These are all to be built within the education system. But it is not there. What reigns is anarchy. And then you keep saying, this is a learning government. Who also was there the other year, last year, this year, with a learning NRM government. The results say things are bad, increasingly bad. So, Charles, that is where I am interested in awakening the civic conscience of a Ugandan. That to be a democratic citizen is not so easy. It requires you coming up and be bold and say this is wrong. One of the lecturers, I forget the name, I really loved, said the only solution may be to Uganda's problem is to let the poor fail to sleep because they have nothing to eat. Through that, even the rich will never sleep because they are worried the poor are awake.
Exactly the point you're raising about whether you train in Harvard or wherever you train from. If you are on Kampala streets and you have churned out all these half-baked people and they are demonstrating or rioting, they will not make a distinction on whether you bought your Mercedes from a loan, whether you have borrowed it, or because you seem to be of a more privilege.
It's apparently logic no longer appeals to the NRM. The only logical conclusion for them is, in your car, you a self-seeker has obtained through either mismanaging NSSF, stealing outrightly. When you pack it out with the guard who's yawning and he says, boss, bring the key, you go back in. What money do you have? Maybe that's the time
let's have Morrison come in. Morrison wanted to speak last. So, Morrison, if you have a learning government, you've been experimenting with universalization of education all these years, and there is no thinking at two issues. One thing you didn't want to speak to is the dropout rates. They're immense. And these are the people you're throwing on the streets. Number two is, if these children are not getting an education that can help build the country's Vision 2040, you have a bullet train on the cover of Vision 2040, you have a space shuttle. Which engineers are going to actualize this?
So let me tell you that NRM government considers human resource as key in transforming the country, and that's why it is why it is aligned in the Vision 2040. And we are not saying that there are no problems in the UPE, in the UPE schools, and the problem of more schooling and less learning. But we are saying that also UPE has helped those parents and those children who could not have received education, and they have received that education. And I've told you that across the streets and everywhere, I have met doctors, I have met lawyers who have gone through UPEs, who have gone through UPE schools.
From which schools?
Now I listened to you.
No, but
now
I'm intolerant to propaganda.
So now, when we receive reports like this, you see, for me, the good thing about NRM government is that it engages in a honest reflection and say, here, things are not happening. We have been pushing for schooling. Now it's time to begin at reflecting on the outputs and the outcomes. And one of the things, Charles, and one of the things is that education in this country is a right. Do you see? So government has got a mandate and responsibility to offer quality education. But also, individuals or citizens of this country have responsibilities, because rights go with responsibilities.
I agree with you absolutely.
So it's also time that parents also woke up and begin to re-engage with their children about learning outcomes, about children doing homework, about and how is the future going to look like, Charles? We are talking about the way forward, because it shouldn't be about saying things are finished and let's go home and sleep. Things cannot work. No. Nancy Birdsall wrote a book called Cash on Delivery, and it actually focuses on education and how to incentivize an education system whereby pay people according to the results they achieve. If you are a teacher in a secondary school or a primary school, and these tests happen, and 70% of your kids in that school have passed, 80%, 90%, then you should get an incentive for that. So maybe it's time to shift away from paying people salaries to just go to schools and they don't teach, to incentivize a system called cash on delivery and pay people when kids pass. So there has to be a thinking, and it is beginning within the NRM to see how do we respond to this. And it's an East African problem.
Do you think,
it's
Morrison,
an East
just
African
one last
problem,
question.
and Uganda has started to think and put ideas like cash on delivery.
Do you think, maybe I could throw this around the table,
Yes.
in 1 minute, strictly, that the political milking of universalization of education has been done enough, and now serious thinking needs to go into what this country actually needs? Starting with you.
No, what I'm telling you is that NRM is beginning to, we know schooling is happening, okay? And schooling is not necessarily delivering those kind of results that we need. So the most important thing now is learning.
Could you replace
And I'm telling you-
NRM? Could you replace NRM with Uganda
This is
and
what
say
I'm telling you.
what Uganda needs to do? Because
Okay.
the political milking of universalization of education
Because
has
you
been
see,
done for the last 20 years.
Ugandans continue to give the NRM the mandate, so you cannot take away that. And now we are thinking of cash on delivery.
Chris, can you use 10 seconds?
Focusing on results.
Chris, can you use 10
Focusing
seconds on this
outputs
question?
and
On the
less
same
of
question,
inputs.
do you think this has been milked enough politically? Now we need to go into some serious thinking, both for parents and government?
First of all, don't tell me about government. I told you in the beginning, in Uganda, government needs rescue. I don't want to go back
Can
on
you
that.
explain that further?
It has been captured
By who?
by individuals.
Your 10 seconds are over. Melina?
So I think it's important to emphasize that, as Morrison said before, this is not just Uganda's problem. It's a problem facing developing countries across the world. Schooling has happened, learning is not happening. So the question is, what do we do next? I think the pay for performance or cash on delivery, there's various names for it, is one possibility. But you find that in Uganda, for example, the education budget has been decreasing. So you can't expect to, and meanwhile the population of pupils has been increasing. So I think these ideas would be great, but you need to have the money to do it. And if you're allocating money into other sectors or into other kinds of spending and reducing the education budget as the student population is increasing, it's going to be very difficult to improve learning outcomes.
Thank you very much.
Saying
Our time is
the
out. We
input-
need to be
That's
getting
your
out of
view.
here. I just need to say one last thing, because I cannot absolve parents of their responsibility.
Thank you very much.
Today being Mother's Day, if my mother hadn't sacrificed everything, absolutely everything she had to be able, I wouldn't be in this studio discussing. So
Child-
parents cannot be absolved of their responsibility, and any parent who wants to see a child get to another level needs to engage now, actually yesterday, not now, and forget about government for the moment.
Not forget
Put
about
pressure on
balance.
government.
Balance.
Put pressure on government. If every parent looked at their child as their responsibility to make better, they would not listen to this propaganda that government gives about education. They'll be demanding something better. Thank you very much, Chris
If
Obore.
a parent can do that.
What do you
but
mean by
Mwabushi,
propaganda,
hold it,
Charles?
Hold it.
What do you mean by
Children
propaganda?
go into school and they jump out. One of the statistics.
No, the
in
good
this
thing
report-
is that we are thinking
One
together,
of-
and
Charles,
one of the things
we
in
are
this
thinking
report-
together and saying
Charles.
government has a responsibility, parents have a responsibility,
They've been,
and that conversation must
government
continue.
has been
Charles.
lulling, your political types have been lulling
Charles.
parents.
States now.
Charles,
No, hold it a moment.
No.
Charles.
RDCs, political mobilizers have been
Charles,
rallying
it's a Sunday and
have
we are
been
talking- we are
singing,
talking
have
to
been
people.
singing parents into
Charles.
sleeping, saying, like Chris said, government is taking care of
Charles,
you.
Parents
Don't
in
worry.
Kampala are way of education. Every child in Kampala, especially for parents who are not very well off to hire drivers, they wake up at 4 a.m. That is the commitment of a parent to have a child in school. Is that good in the well-being of that child? What can this parent do? Government says schools must open at 8. Children move at 4 a.m. Parents are forced to do it. You're saying parents should be careful. To what
Thank
point?
you very much.
To
Thank you
what
very much.
point?
Our time is out. Thank you
You
very
can't
much.
have the
Thank you very much.
So the best
Thank you very much.
No, no, so the best
Thank you very much.
we
Maybe
have
some
to
time for the
engage.
show. Thank you very much.
We engage. You see,
No.
you must understand
Morrison
that,
and
please.
Chris, can you end that discussion? We'll take it
You see,
further.
Morrison,
You want to share a Twitter
The
account?
NRM
You
is,
and,
Yes, I was going to say, and Morrison can also share his. You can ask questions on Twitter to me or Morrison, and the others, I'm not sure if they're on Twitter. I'm at Melina Platas. And I can also share a link to the Owezo report and to the World Bank study
Okay.
after this program.
Morrison, can you share yours as well?
At Ruakakamba.
At Rakakamba.
What would
Chris
you-
used to be on
No,
Twitter.
for what? This is- how do you want to get
Our time is
propaganda
out.
from
Let's
Morrison?
continue the debate. Let's continue the debate even on the
NRM education is for
NTV
class
website.
creation.
NTV,
Not nation building.
NTV Twitter account and NTV Facebook, you can continue this debate, and maybe will guide us on future discussion. Thank you very much to you, all our viewers, for joining us tonight, and once again, a happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there.
Education is for class.